So, like, we have to remember again from the previous slide the heuristic, right? That is a certain rule of thumb that has to be followed, and a kind of script that has to come from here. So here we have then Xi Jinping and Putin shaking hands. I mean, what is talked about in the book here is that really the idea of reciprocity, I owe you one, the idea that you can do something for somebody else and get something back. Cialdini claims that this is like the cornerstone of human civilization. I mean, if you don't have this, then you don't have civilization, basically. It's sort of impossible. So he claims that this is sort of completely universal, almost all across the globe. There's very few places that are functional in any sense where this will not apply. That the idea that you will do something for somebody else, and when you do something for them, you give them something, you make a concession, whatever it is, they will feel obliged to do it something back, and if they don't, there will be a large element of shame, and there will be a large element of guilt associated with the people who do not reciprocate. So he will talk about in the book how
and the reciprocation or lack of can even sort of influence further social circles than just the the original two elements. It can go further into sort of family or even small community size affections.
Oh yeah, certainly. I mean, this it's not just two individuals. It could be, we'll look at some examples, but say one country doing something for another country, or one tribe doing something for another tribe. Or let's say that, I mean, I'll give an example from my own life, right? I was walking back from work one day, and it was snowing, and I met like this kid who was just running around. He was almost crying, and I asked him what the problem was. He said he had lost his cell phone. Like, he had a sort of a smartphone, and he was walking on like this long stretch of road, and he could have lost it anywhere. There's like these large heaps of snow that was quite soft. So, I mean, we ended up just sort of, passing each other. But as I walked a little bit further down, I was actually able to spot his phone, and I walked back a little bit to catch up to him to give him the phone. And of course, that was the end of it. But later, like his father basically came and gave me a sort of champagne bottle and like a box of chocolates, and he offered basically that he would do me favors if I needed to catch a ride somewhere, or he said basically if I needed anything, then
and this is the most
I should
important
just ask him,
point
right?
of Cialdini's point here is that usually what you get in return, the reciprocation, is very often worth way more than the initial favor.
Yes, I mean, just we're going to do some pro tips along the way here. The first pro tip here, especially for you Sumer guys, because I feel like this presentation and this book will be like super useful for Sumers, because I feel like a lot of this stuff comes natural to the Boomer generation and Boomer guys who will who could sort of intuitively know a lot of this stuff, like say like the Boomer salesman. But for people who are just sort of terminally online, they kind of understand influence through social media and so on. But in terms of like this kind of personal contact stuff, it's a little bit more unfamiliar for them. So pro tip number one is that if you're out drinking with your friends, you just buy your friends a drink. Just start off that way. Just do it.
If you buy the first round, you'll usually end up on top.
Yeah, you will. I mean, you will get more than what you gave back usually. So people will remember it, and they will feel like they're sort of, okay, you bought them one, and they're indebted to you now, so they have to buy you at least the same. Of course, now that we know that, okay, this is a kind of universal rule, there's a heuristic here, and there's a kind of script that follows with you do something to someone, and they're indebted to you, and they have to give you something back. Of course, then the question is, how do we use this for influence? And then this is the soft power angle here, is that you try to then use favors as a sort of angle of attack, or as a kind of weapon to get what you want. And this is something that will happen, let's say, like with politics, for instance. If you look at lobbying in the United States, where rich people will just give large sums of money to politicians, or they'll buy them tickets to a basketball game. They'll send them, buy them food, drinks, and so on. They might like buy them hookers. I mean, and this is not something that they're doing, that saying that, okay, if I get you this, that I want something specific in return. They will just pamper these people, and because they have that, and because the politician remembers that they've been pampered by this person, then that will basically go into uh, be in the back of their head when they're thinking about legislation, and when they're thinking about making decisions in terms of laws, in terms of spending, and so on. And I mean, there's a reason there's so much of this stuff. There just seems to be more because it works, and it seems to be no stopping it. So you have to ask yourself, if they're spending that much money, they're not doing it for nothing. Like, they're getting their fair share of value back.
Yeah.
Let's see. If you can bring up the quote sheet again, there's this sort of an interesting quote you might want to read about Lyndon B. Johnson. That's sort of directly from the book.
I just tried to bring it up, but it's like in private mode. Do you have
Let's see if I'll give you the link. Link there. Let's see.
I have the link. It's just I have to log in to open the document. I don't know if you can open it up.
Let's see. Okay. I will try to change the access, and I'll post the link again. See if it works. Is this better?
Yeah, this works. Okay. Do you want the weapons of the?
So it's under reciprocity, and then reciprocity in politics. That's where the quote is.
Oh, here it is. Okay. Let me just bring that up on the screen. Now, do you want me to just read the quote here?
Yeah.
Politics is another arena in which the power of the reciprocity rule shows itself. Reciprocation tactics appear at every level. At the top, elected officials engage in log rolling and the exchange of favors that makes politics the place of strange bedfellows indeed. The out-of-character vote of one of our elected representatives on a bill or measure can often be understood as a favor returned to the bill's sponsor. Political analysts were amazed at Lyndon Johnson's ability to get so many of his programs through Congress during his early administration. Even members of Congress who were thought to be strongly opposed to the proposals were voting for them. Close examination by political scientists has found that the cause not to be so much Johnson's political savvy as the large score of favors he had been able to provide to other legislators during his many years in power in the House and the Senate. As president, he was able to produce a truly remarkable amount of legislation in a short time by calling in those favors. It is interesting that this same process may account for the problems Jimmy Carter had in getting his programs through Congress during his early administration, despite heavy Democratic majorities in both House and Senate. Carter came to the presidency from outside the Capitol Hill establishment. He campaigned on his outside Washington identity, saying that he was indebted to no one there. Much of his legislative difficulty upon arriving may be traced to the fact that no one there was indebted to him. At another level, we can see the recognized strength of the reciprocity rule in the desire of corporations and individuals to provide judicial and legislative officials with gifts and favors, and in the series of the legal restrictions against such gifts and favors. Even with legitimate political contributions, the stockpiling of obligations often underlies the stated purpose of supporting a favorite candidate. One look at the list of companies and organizations that contribute to the campaigns of both major candidates in an important election gives evidence of such motives. A skeptic, requiring direct evidence of the quid pro quo expected by political contributors, might look to the remarkably bald-faced admission by Charles H. Keating, Jr., who was later convicted on multiple counts of fraud in his country's savings and loan disaster. Addressing the question of whether a connection existed between the $1.3 million he had contributed to the campaigns of 5 U.S. senators and their subsequent actions on his behalf against federal regulators, he asserted, "I want to say this in the most forceful way I can. I certainly hope so." At the grassroots level, local political organizations have learned that the principal way to keep their candidates in office is to make sure they provide a wide range of little favors to the voters. The ward healers of many cities still operate effectively in this fashion. But ordinary citizens are not alone in trading political support for small personal favors. During the 1992 presidential primary campaign, actress Sally Kellerman was asked why she was lending her name and efforts to the candidacy of Democratic hopeful Jerry Brown. Her reply, 20 years ago, I asked 10 friends to help me move. He was the only one who showed up.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff, and I remember I showed this to you the first time that you seem to take a little bit of issue with it because it seems to be very kind of over focused or in a sense reductive in a way that it's just going to reduce everything that happens to some degree of persuasion that fits into this model, and then you can just say that like the reason Trump wasn't successful is that he didn't do enough favors for people, which of course is not true. Like there's this entire ideological structure that was opposing him and so on and so on. But
Yeah, there is a level, I'll say, as a critique of the book, as far as I got in it. There is a certain degree of academic navel gazing going on here, but it is a very useful tool in your tool belt.
yeah, I think if you're going to be, if you're going to compare two politicians with like everything else being equal, and one of them has like a good machine in terms of trying to butter up the opponents, butter up people, and so on, and the other one doesn't do that and just goes straight in on, campaigning on principle or whatever, then I think the gift people are going to win. The people who butter people up. I mean, it's a very it's a very good strategy. I've seen it a lot as well, working in the private sector in IT, where the salespeople that we have employed, all they do is basically just go to parties. They're just given money and they're just sent to visit people in other organizations that are bigger than ours and party with them. They're just like, okay, we'll just take these guys out for a boat trip or go karting or something, go have dinner or go to strip clubs and just make them feel good about themselves. And later, that's going to turn into contracts, and it works. I don't know if you have experience with that in business, Walrus.
With what? You cut out for a moment.
No, no, I cut out. Oh, sorry. No, no. What I said is that I have experience in the private sector with basically salespeople, right? And if you're doing like business to business sale, it's not walking on doors, knocking, trying to sell vacuum cleaners.
Oh
It's
yeah,
basically
yeah,
people who work full time partying, right? They just go and
yeah.
take people from larger organizations out to party and go karting or go
Definitely, yeah.
surfing or something and go to strip clubs.
And
Uh,
that's pretty
yeah,
much once you've been hired somewhere, that's pretty much how the recruitment process goes, right? If you're gonna move from one company to another, that's how they get you, right? You go to you go to you go to conferences, etc., and then you basically just party with a bunch of recruiters, right? Um,
yes. I mean,
and they
I
give you
when
free
I yeah.
stuff.
I've taken advantage of this because I read the book, right? I mean, he does explain it in the book that for most people, like for the normie, this is very difficult to do anything about. But I have a very disagreeable personality, so I have just had recruiters buy me like whale sushi and stuff like that, and I just never called them back.
Right. I've been
So
in similar situations. Yes. I mean,
uh,
it's not very difficult to be aware that that's what they're doing because it's very blatant.
yes,
But having this sort of in the back of your head really helps. Glow in the Dark says you catch more flies with sugar than vinegar. Actually, you catch even more flies if you use red wine and then put a little bit of soap in it. And that way, you catch a lot of flies.
pro tip
But
number
yes, it's a
two.
form
Yeah.
of sugar. Yeah. So you're right.
Okay, I mean we'll go through some of the points that he has under reciprocity and try and expand the way you think about reciprocity a little bit to the point where he says that making a concession could be seen as doing a certain person a favor, right? Um, so he gives the example of a Boy Scout that approaches him and basically asks him if he wants to buy tickets to like the local, local baseball game, and then he says no. And then afterwards, he offers him, well, okay, would you just like to buy some chocolate bars? And then he buys bars worth of $10. And of course, he doesn't even like chocolate, but in a sense, he felt kind of guilty having said no to the boy who was selling him the baseball tickets. So he felt like he had to buy the chocolate. I mean, he sort of made the boy has like made one concession. He didn't get what he wanted, so okay, I'll just yield on the next one because him making that concession to me was a kind of favor. And that doesn't sound very intuitive at first, but how this manifests is basically like, say, in whether you are in politics or you're working on some type of project, or you are in business and so on. If you're trying to negotiate something that you want, you basically start by asking for something that you think is not going to be approved, like, something you think is kind of outlandish, and then basically if they say no to that, then you can ask for the things you really wanted, because now they feel, because they've already said no once, they feel like they have to say yes to the next thing. So you don't ask for what you really want first. You start by making up something that you think is like would be unacceptable, and then the next thing is that you ask for uh, what you actually wanted. An example could be, let's say you're working on some sort of cartoon show. I mean, if you've seen something like Family Guy or South Park or something. If Seth MacFarlane from Family Guy, he will talk to like the network and ask, maybe he will just make up something like, okay, I want to have like a murder scene or something, some kind of like snuff scene in Family Guy that he knows it's kind of, they're going to say no to that. Okay,
Yeah.
well, okay, well, he said no. Well, then he'll ask for, okay, well, I want to maybe have some swear words in this part that are a little bit on PC and so on. And then, okay, we'll yield to that because the other thing seemed, we've said no once, so we're going to give you half, right? They have this instinct to.
Speedrunner in the chat beat me to it. It's The Art of the Deal by Donald Trump. You ask for 70 and you hedge down to 30. You're still 30 up.
Yes, and I mean, this is something that actually works. I mean, the worst thing that can happen. I mean, you might get no in both cases, but you're much better hedged. And I mean, maybe they even give you the kind of outlandish thing. If you try to do like a salary negotiation or something, you ask for something. Okay, you first ask for like a high sum, and then you go and ask for the sum that you actually want. Uh, which of course it's something that people would be worried about, in terms of like you would piss people off if you ask for too much. But I mean, he has a lot of parts in the book where he just explains that no, it's actually not the case.
And just to
Yeah.
drive the point home, I don't want to derail sort of what you're talking about here, really. But we did talk a bit about a Twitter account. So while you're explaining this, I'm going to be sort of pulling up a couple of images from a a Twitter account called This N-Word Trump, which collects tweets off of Twitter.com and displays them. And for those of you who feel that this isn't applicable to what we're about, well, you can see how this can influence larger swaths of the population. Sorry, keep going, Ludwig, and I'll
Yeah,
just
no,
share the
I
images as
really
we go.
I'm glad you found the Twitter account, because there are so many examples going on currently with this stuff happening in politics.
So just continue your explanation. I'll just let these play in the background, okay?
Okay, yeah, good. So, I mean, you see now, like, probably what's being displayed here with the COVID checks, for instance. Trump sending out checks to people with his name and face on, giving people, let's say, like $1,000. This is something that people remember. They feel indebted to Trump, and I do kind of suspect that that's part of the reason why Trump got like a higher, black vote than any previous Republican candidate, is because he just directly just gave them gifts. It's something you don't typically see. I mean, now with Joe Biden, you're seeing the student loan forgiveness stuff. That's also just another kind of a sort of style of reciprocity, where he's just giving people a gift in exchange for a vote. And it'll be interesting to see how. Sorry, I can't concentrate. this, is,
Sorry.
this is just too funny.
I can keep
No,
them for
no,
later, but I think
no,
they're
yeah,
they're,
just
they're the most
show.
effective when they're
Yeah,
just in the background.
just keep showing a couple. So I'll try to finish up on the reciprocity here. Um, so the question is then, okay, another pro tip: how do you take advantage of this aside from the tips that we've given? Let's say if you do something, right? If you do something for somebody else, you help them move their couch, or you finish their homework on time or something, and they're saying something like, "Oh, thank you, I owe you one," and your instinct might be to say, "Oh, don't worry about it. It was nothing." No, 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 no. You don't say that. You say, you would have done the same for me, right? This is what you're going to say every time from now on. After you've seen this presentation, you're just going to say, every time you do someone a favor, you're just going to say, "You would have done the same for me," and then they will. So
Tenfold.
yeah, tenfold. let's see some other pointers here. If you're going to give people gifts, it's usually better to give people something personalized than something standardized, because what he says in the chapter in the sort of self-defense section, how do you defend yourself against it, is really you can defend yourself against it by refusing, right? This is a typical thing, that people will refuse favors, or say like a woman who doesn't, you'll try to buy her a drink and she's not accepting because she feels like that makes her indebted to you. You could refuse, although that will create a sort of bad mood and bad associations for later, or you could try to reframe it in your mind to the point where you're thinking about it as, this is not a favor. Like, this is basically a strategic attempt to make me do something, and refusing this is not really, I'm not refusing a favor in good faith. I'm actually just refusing a sort of influence attempt.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that covers.
That covers it. I'm going to stop sharing images now and go back to
I love it.